Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cancer. I am a host and producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's got an 80 grade baseball name. It's John Pracoda.
I appreciate that, but I don't have the Stan Lee name of every single player that we either acquired or traded for, or traded away this trade deadline.
I like Pracoda. Pracoda is like a solid surname. You know, it's no Butterworth, but Pracoda's up there. So John, this is the second of our trade deadline recap episodes. We just talked to each other about the Miller, Sears, DeVries trade. This one probably won't be as titillating in terms of the long-term implications, especially because what we got back is not very long-term. It is quite a short-term return, but very interesting nonetheless. Again, a very AJ Preller-ish trade coming down the pike. But initial impressions on the trade, which is I will just lay out here. Padres getting half of a season of Ryan O'Hearn and 1.5 years of Ramon Laureano. We'll talk about that in a little bit. From the Baltimore Orioles in exchange for Boston Bateman, Cobb Hightower, Tyson Neighbors, Brandon Butterworth, Victor Figueroa, and Tanner Smith. John, what are your impressions?
This is the kind of trade that I like. This is the kind of trade that like Padres Twitter, I don't know, I'm not on Padres Twitter, but folks on those similar things say, like, I don't care about this guy, he was never going to be a Padre, and then, like, 5 years later, you're like, Tyson Neighbors ends up being a great closer or whatever. But whatever, you give up 6 guys, and none of them are one of your top prospects, and you get useful utility for a playoff run, and then the next year afterwards with Ramon Laureano. Sweet, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. This was the trade. It came down the pike about 1:45 Pacific time, so about an hour 15 before the deadline closed. And to me, it was the capstone trade of the day. It was the one where it made everything else sort of make sense. You know, we talked a little bit at the end of the last show about was Leo DeVries the best, was Mason Miller the best trade chip for Leo DeVries to be cashed in for, and the sort of varied merits to that. And I think when you saw this trade come through, everything was like, right, okay, this must have been lined up in the works, et cetera, when that Mason Miller trade went through. Because, I mean, I'll be honest, like, this is basically an A trade for me, for the Padres. It's a win-now move, don't get me wrong. But this is if you're going to make a win-now trade, this is exactly the type of trade that you make. You shore up your 2 biggest weaknesses, which is designated hitter and left field. And the Padres did just that with Ryan O'Hearn, who was an all-star this year, and Ramon Laureano, who I think is someone who's sort of perennially been on AJ Preller's radar. Probably has been trying to acquire him, I think, since 21 or 22, back when he was with the Oakland Athletics. And has never really come through, and now AJ finally gets his man. So why don't we go first through the return that the Orioles are getting, the Padres prospects that we shipped out, because, again, like we mentioned, it is a full 6-pack of Padres prospects, and we can kind of talk about who we might miss the most from this, and then we'll get into O'Hearn and Laureano and sort of what the game theory behind lineup construction and everything will be later for the Padres season. But John, why don't you take us through our Padres prospect 6-pack?
All right, let's start with Boston Bateman, classic Stanley alliteration. He is a just shy of 20-year-old left-handed pitcher who is 6'8", 240. He's a big boy. The long and hanging read up on him reads as a projectable, not a word that you would normally think of as the top of AJ Preller's hierarchy of player. a Sean Manaea-like player who pretty consistently has been in the 93 to 95 or 97 mile per hour range in 2025. He's an innings eater, starter's frame with mechanical consistency, but Bateman's ceiling feels relatively low. All right, whatever. Those are the kind of guys that that you need in your system. Ideally, they're not getting lots of playing time, but if they do get playing time, they're better than some guy that you just have to pick up off free agency. He's 19, almost 20, so can he be much better than that? Probably. He has a chance of growing into a better player. Obviously, he's 19 years old, but if he's the kind of a more of a projectable guy, then otherwise his ceiling is, like he says, relatively low. Not gonna make any of us cry down the line. He's not gonna be a James Wood where we're talking about him in the Discord every day. And then next up is Tyson Neighbors. He's a reliever who has been in the 93 to 95 range with his fastball throughout 2025. Pure middle relief look, should move quickly. There's a great chance, I would say, that he doesn't even make the major leagues for much. The chances of him making more than one F4, like him being a bust, I would say are super high. This is kind of the 40 range value that you'd probably be in that 75% chance that he doesn't get even one WAR. And if he does get one WAR, I don't think he's going to be a closer for somebody with a fastball running 93 to 95. That being said, he does have crazy induced vertical, so I might be wrong, but so does Yuki Matsui, and I was all hyped on Yuki Matsui and his induced vertical, and that has not worked out. Why? Because he's not throwing it hard enough, and that might be the case with Tyson Neighbors as well. Maybe not. Maybe they add some velocity and they keep that induced vertical, and he turns out to be really good. We'll see. Next up, Cobb Hightower. He is a family members of one of the people from House of the Dragon. They're the kind of green side, not really good, mostly bad guys. And a utility infield prospect with big power, without big power projection due to his lack of size. So utility guy, whatever. Brandon Butterworth, like Boston Bateman, a classic Stanley alliterative name. He says in his read-up on him that he was the best shortstop defender in Fort Wayne, but was moved off shortstop due to the presence of Leo DeVries, which kind of is in our last episode. We were talking about whether Leo DeVries, especially if he gains weight and strength, will stay on shortstop. This is kind of tells you that he's already not the best defender. Butterworth is the better defender on the roster currently. But this guy is going to be a versatile, it sounds like a Tyler Wade guy to me, versatile as possible to play a big role because he lacks strength with the bat, so much so that it will impact his ability to make contact at all as he climbs. So maybe he'll play every single position and hit poorly. Figueroa, I didn't even write down his first name. It is Victor Figueroa. I don't know. He has 112 maximum exit velocity, but just a 70% contact rate. So that sounds like Josh Mears. He is a really big guy, like Josh Mears. He has huge exit velocity, like Josh Mears. Can't make contact with the ball, like Josh Mears. So, when's the last time you heard the name Josh Mears? Probably been a while. I wouldn't be surprised.
He just retired.
Similar guy. Did he?
Yeah, he did officially.
Oh, you're keeping up to date on the Josh Mears news.
It was on the Padres Hot Tub Discord. I saw it, and I was like, whoa, that name's a throwback.
Yeah, because he had that one, I don't remember who was off, but he had that one home run in spring training that was like 117 miles an hour or something crazy. And then everybody was like, oh my God, this is going to be a guy. And he was not a guy. Tanner Smith sounds like a Cleveland pitcher. He is a 6'6" guy with with nice arm action, but currently pretty generic stuff. Yeah, whatever. That's it on him. So all of these guys are kind of not use the word titillating. I'm going to just keep using the word titillating because it's a good word. Not the titillating, tantalizing, exciting players that you would normally see at the top of AJ Preller's cohort of prospects. Also probably, I would say, not guys that if we had kept them for another year or 2 years, suddenly their trade value would go up because they have relatively low ceilings. I don't think that they would suddenly, like, their possibility of at one point in time, at one, minute in time being worth a star player at some point. I think all of their likelihoods of that happening are super low, which probably adds to AJ Preller's thought process overall, because he uses these things as these players, these human beings, as value commodities. And I don't think any of them would probably be likely to have that kind of Estuary Ruiz type bump in the next year. Maybe not. Maybe they will, but probably not.
Yeah, in terms of a future war analysis, I basically said there's not really any use doing it because none of these prospects that we gave up are ranked high enough. Like, I think you can look at this sort of soup of 6 guys and say that they're probably worth about one future war, which, you could say that the Padres are giving that up. And if the return was just half a season of O'Hearn and half of a season of Ramon Laureano, I'd say... yeah, probably about even. This seems like a win now move, picking up a couple rentals. But the sort of the wrench in this, and where I think this really comes out in the Padres' favor, is that Laureano has a club option next year, and it is a very cheap club option. I believe it's $6.5 million that the Padres would owe Ramon Laureano if they activate it next year. At the time that deal was signed with the Orioles, I think that, you could argue that was, probably a pretty even, fair valuation of Ramon Laureano, but he's gone on to have an unbelievable offensive season, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But, I think that the projections of Ramon Laureano are going to be updated. Right now, Zips going into this season projected him as putting up 1.4 WAR next year, and that's in 378 plate appearances. I think that number will be higher because he's put up a 141 WRC plus this season so far. He's already put up 2.2 F4 in sub.
That's a real 141 WRC plus. Like the XWOB is exactly the same as the.
Oh yeah,
it's real. It's not something that is just.
It's not fake. He has a 521 slug, and I think he has a 530 expected slug. Like, this is a real thing, and the fact that the Padres are able to control that for next year with $6.5 million is a massive win. And it just I think if I were an Orioles fan, I'd be pretty pissed because this to me indicates that they don't think that they're going to be able to use Laureano next year on a winning team, which means that the Orioles, in their very brief period of competitiveness, are now dipping into a slight, I wouldn't call it a full rebuild, but they're probably looking more at 2027. Given the fact that they, have Jackson Holiday and I don't know when Adley Rutschman is going to be a free agent, but they have these guys for a few more years. So, a little disappointing for Orioles fans, but hey, happy to be on the winning end of this, the receiving end of it. Let's talk about the players that we're getting back. So Ryan O'Hearn, interesting guy. He's 32 years old. He's a lefty batter, first base / DH. Drafted in 2014 by the Kansas City Royals in the 8th round. And ultimately, he spent several years with the Royals and was not good. He was actually sub-replacement level on his career with the Kansas City Royals. So much so to the point that in 2022, he was DFA'd by the Royals to make room for, John, do you know which former Padres pitcher on the Royals roster he was DFA'd for? This would be an unbelievable poll. This is the end of 2022. So this is November of 2022.
So or after?
End of the season.
So during the end of the season, he was DFA'd.
Yeah.
And they signed a player who was a former.
They signed a player for
It has to be a crappy one,
2023.
because it's in the middle of the season, right?
No. It was after the season. November of
after the
2022.
season. Okay.
Yeah.
November of 2022.
This would be unbelievable if you got this.
Well, then it's probably so a Royals player
Former Padres pitcher.
who's a former Padres pitcher. And it's not Lugo. It's not a Waka.
It's not Waka. It's not Lugo.
For them, is it a starting pitcher or a relief pitcher?
It is I think he's a former starter. I don't know if he's since really. I think he was starting with the Padres. I don't think that he might still not be starting.
I've got no ringing of any bells. I have no idea.
Jordan Lyles.
Oh,
Jordan
God.
Lyles.
I remember that now.
Yeah, I was like, if you get this would be unbelievable. But just to give you an idea of like what the Royals thought of Ryan O'Hearn, they DFA'd him to make
Slightly
room
less
for
than
Jordan Lyles. Okay, so the Orioles trade for him for cash considerations, one of the most prolific players in Major League Baseball history, cash considerations. And basically from the moment he gets to Baltimore in 23 and 24, he's a plus contributor. He puts up, nothing but consistent, 117 WRC plus in back-to-back seasons, 1.5 F4 in back-to-back seasons. Just on either, so there's 368 plate appearances in 2023, 494 plate appearances in 2024. Just solid. Dependable, solid, above average hitter, not blowing the lights off of anyone. And then this season, all of a sudden, Ryan O'Hearn has really, really blossomed. He's 134 WRC plus, slashing 282, 375, 462. Should also be said that he's playing a really good first base. According to StatCast, his range is outs above average. 93rd percentile with 6 OAA at first base. Look, in his career, he's a strict platoon bat. He has a 59 WRC plus against lefties and a 109 WRC plus against righties. This season's no different, although obviously those numbers are much higher overall. 143 WRC plus against righties against a 92 WRC plus against lefties. What do you make of Ryan O'Hearn, John?
So the thing about him that makes me less nervous is that now this is his third consecutive season where you would take any of those seasons as like the outcome for the rest of this season. If he puts up 117 WRC plus, great. That's perfectly acceptable. That's a cromulent result. And then now he's had 2 straight years of having an xWOBA over 350, so also dope. The thing that makes me a little bit nervous, which has nothing to do with Ryan O'Hearn, but has to do with things that have nothing to do with science and are just weird feelings in the back of your head, are what were the last 2 like similar players to O'Hearn that we got at the deadline to kind of fill a hole? For me, that's Josh Bell and Mitch Moreland, Mitchie Two Bags. So do you remember 2020 when Mitch Moreland played for the Padres in 2020? He came over having a 205 WRC plus. It was 2020, so it was in like 79 at bats, but whatever. What was his line for the Padres?
His WRC plus for the Padres?
Sure.
63.
60.
Oh, okay. Pretty close.
Josh Bell. So he was at 145 before he came over, sporting a 301, 384, 493 slash line in a significant 437 PAs. He had 210 plate appearances for the Padres in 2022. What, pray tell me, was his WRC plus?
58.
79.
Oh, better.
79.
Okay.
I know, 79 was 192, 316, 270. So held up by a few walks that he was receiving. And then, those 2 things are, nothing to do with Ryan O'Hearn, has nothing to do with anything, to be honest, and he has a longer track record than those 2 had at that time, at least in terms of consistency over the past few years. That being said, I also have a question of what exactly is his value. So the hole that he's filling, it seems, now that we got him and Laureano, is first base / DH, right? I think that we can both agree that. It seems like Laureano's probably going to be the consistent left fielder, and now he is first base / DH, and so is Gavin Sheets, and so is Arise. And he is basically the same dude as Gavin Sheets in that they're both left-handed hitters who are, first base / DH. Is there a difference between those 2, or is there some time that you'd want to play those 2 and not play Arise? Probably not. Arise is, going to play. And so now you're having to choose between Gavin Sheets and Ryan O'Hearn, and the other one's going to be a pinch hitter. Their xWOBAs are Sheets' 356 so far this year, and then his is 374 so far this year. So they're very similar players overall. And then, how important is a bench pinch hitter? Probably not crazy important. So I do wonder about redundancy more than anything else.
Yeah, I think this is
maybe it's good to have built-in redundancy when you like Mitch Moreland and Josh Bell, somebody falls off, and then you can use the other one.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think this is still a reflection of the original sin of the Padres roster construction at the beginning of the year in left field. In that, Ramon Laureano, he's good enough to play every day, and I don't want to, this is not some sort of like demerit towards Ramon Laureano, but ideally you would have another righty bat who platoons well against lefty pitching, who you could then swap out for Gavin Sheets or Ryan O'Hearn or however you're aligned that day, and you can have a just true platoon lineup. Right now on the Padres roster, the righty platoon DH bat is Jose Iglesias. Which I love Jose Iglesias as a bench guy, down the road, but as the main DH against like lefty pitchers, like kind of leaves a lot to be desired. It's kind of hard to believe that the Padres didn't have someone that they could find at the beginning of the year who could fulfill that role, and were sort of left to go to OMG.
It's usually the easiest thing. A short-sided platoon, that's usually the easiest thing to get. Is a right-handed hitter who can hit lefties.
So, again, the O'Hearn situation in a vacuum is fine. I think it's just a little left to be desired on the short side of that platoon. I think in terms of the first base thing, it's really interesting because O'Hearn should absolutely be playing first base over Luis Arraez. I really don't think there's any way that you can justify it, but I think that the thinking for the team is you're going to play Arraez no matter what against lefties or righties, and if you were to play O'Hearn at first base instead of Arraez, and you needed to substitute him later in the game for Jose Iglesias, you would essentially be putting Jose Iglesias at second and moving Jake Cronenworth to first in the middle of the game.
Which is the best
versus just
outcome of.
I'm sorry.
Which is the best defensive outcome of all of the options. So that's,
I agree.
To me, a good. Yeah.
I agree, but I don't think that the Padres, or at least Mike Schilt, views it that way. I think that they're like, it's the least disruptive if we just sub out our DHs, which I don't agree with personally, but like, hey, that's on Grit Squad Mike Schilt to decide, and not on these two bozos and on their computers and their spreadsheets and all that stuff. But we'll disagree and agree to disagree with Mike Schilt. But I think that so far, I mean, who's to say? We've got 2 months of the season left. Things could change, but so far that's the signal that the team has given in the 2 games that we've seen so far, and I think that would be a mistake going forward. Anything else on O'Hearn before we launch into Laureano?
The only thing that I can think is that he's obviously killing it this year, and he was last year too, and then kind of the year before as well. His ex-Woba con, so like how hard he hits the ball, has been pretty consistent the whole time. It's really just that he's had more like temperance at the plate. He's struck out fewer times, and he's getting to his pitches, and so he's getting to put the ball in play more often, or take a walk. But so since he's like kind of getting ahead in the count, he's doing the damage that he's always done. So to me, that's a positive aspect. Like as long as he's getting his pitch, he's going to hit it hard. Not always over the fence because he's more of a hard contact line drive guy than a home run guy, but enough to provide damage.
Yeah. So on to Laureano. So Laureano, interesting guy. He just turned 31, which is kind of remarkable because in my mind he's just sort of a guy who's been around for a long time, but he just turned 31. He's a Dominican player, but he came and played college baseball at Northeastern Oklahoma A&M University. So
Northeastern Oklahoma A&M University.
Yeah, I didn't even look up what the mascot is on that one. But all of that's say impossible. he was taken in the MLB domestic draft rather than being an international signee. So he was taken in the 16th round by the Houston Astros in 2014, sort of when they were at the pinnacle of their prospect building capability before they built the World Series trash can smashing team a few years later. But Laureano was not thought of very highly in the Astros organization. In fact, he was not protected at the end of the 2017 season and was almost undoubtedly going to be selected in the Rule 5 draft. And so the Astros traded him to the Athletics right before the Rule 5 draft at the winter meetings. And they traded him for Do you know which relief pitcher? This is an all-world strategy question or trivia question. It's almost cruel that I'm asking it.
No idea.
It is a pitcher named Brandon Bailey. Who ended up only throwing 7 1/3 innings for the Houston Astros in the COVID season.
He's different than Boston Bateman or Brandon Butterworth.
Sorry, he's different. Yeah, I know. It's
Boston
just
Bateman or Brandon Butterworth.
Another B alliterative name. Yeah, so that was the extent of Brandon Bailey's major league career, and so you can say, unfortunately for the Astros, they lost out on that one. And since he started playing in the major leagues with the Oakland Athletics, super interesting guy. I mean, in 2019, in his age 24 season, he put up almost 4 F4, 127 WRC plus, playing good defense. I think the thing that people know Ramon Laureano the most for is his arm, because he's had just some all-world, all-time throws from the outfield assists to get runners out. And after Oakland, he was traded. He went to New York for a little bit, the New York Mets. He went to the Cleveland Guardians. Eventually ended up with the Baltimore Orioles. And when he ended up with the Orioles, he signed this contract that was a 2-year deal with a club option as the second year. He was getting paid $4 million this season, and then next year, like we said, is going to be paid about $6.5 million. And again, at the time, he was sort of a journeyman during the end of his time with the Athletics, was putting up sub 100 WRC pluses, and then sort of revitalizes his career a little bit last year in 2024, ends the season with a 108 WRC plus. And like we said, this season, he's just seen this power explosion. He's slashing 285, 350, 521, which again makes him the highest slugger on the Padres right now. And as John mentioned earlier, 372 WOBA, 372 expected WOBA. This is not helium. This is the real deal. This guy has been hitting the snot out of the ball. And John, when you saw the Padres traded for Ramon Laureano, what was your feeling?
Thank God. Mostly just that we got a guy. It didn't even have to be Ramon Laureano, but a left fielder was nice to have. We had such obvious holes, and so if we would have gone into the trade deadline and gotten a reliever and then left that left field open and the catching spot open, it would have been absolutely horrible. But, he's having a good year. He is more than O'Hearn, kind of a, whoa, this happened out of nowhere, question mark of whether it's possible to keep going. That being said, his contract is so reasonable that even if he puts up around 1 WAR next year, it's worth it. So, outfield depth, wonderful. He can play left or right field, play it adequately. OAA says that he's not very spry on his feet, but that being said, our left field is pretty small, so I'm sure
exactly
his play in left field at Petco with his arm would probably be a cromulent defender, like I said before. There is a couple things that I want to dig into that is kind of peculiar to him that I don't know exactly how they're going to play out, but there's one thing that's kind of promising. But before I go into that, I perseverated on Northeastern Oklahoma A&M University, and I will pay you $1 American if you tell me what A&M stands for. So there's schools that are like Texas A&M. What does A&M stand for?
I know that the A is agriculture.
Okay.
Fuck, but I don't know. Is M... Okay, so if A is agriculture, is M manufacturing?
Ooh, close. It's agricultural and mechanical. So
mechanical!
He went to Northeastern Oklahoma Agricultural and Mechanical University. Whoa.
Yeah, because they're supposed to be like technical colleges, right?
Yeah, suppose
like
so.
Trade schools.
Especially if they're in Northeast Oklahoma.
Okay, so that was the first thing.
That was the first thing. Let's break him down more than agricultural and mechanical. So one thing is he is not really a splits guy. He kind of is overall in his career. In his career, he's put up a 122 WRC plus against lefties, but a 108 WRC plus against righties, so that's less than one standard deviation away in terms of quality. So not somebody that you'd obviously say let's hit this guy primarily against lefties. And in fact, this year it's been completely switched to the tune of a WRC plus against lefties of 115, so 15% above average, and a WRC plus against right-handed pitchers of 155 with a splits of 302 average, 364 OBP, and 556 slugging, and a 920 OPS overall. So he's just crushing right-handed pitchers. Pretty much been very good on all kinds of pitches: fastball, breaking ball, off speed, all at least 320 xwOBA or higher. 385 on fastballs, 385 on breaking balls. So he's crushing both breaking balls and fastballs, and still being effective against off-speed pitching. And then the one thing that was interesting to me, because he's kind of changed a little bit of how he's batted, like what his batted ball profile is, particularly in one individual case where he's pulling the ball in the air a lot more. And if you think about pulling the ball in the air as a right-handed hitter in Petco Park, that tends to be successful. That's like what Higgy did to have such great numbers at Petco, is he would pull the ball to that, to the left field side, and he would be able to, instead of hitting doubles, hit home runs. And so if he continues to do that, he's pulling the ball in the air to 23.8% clip this year compared to a 16.7% for Major League as a whole. So, 1.5 times as much as average. That should play well in Petco Park, especially in regards to hitting home runs.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, like, this is, we're going to talk about Fermin in a second. We obviously already talked about Mason Miller and JP Sears. But Laureano's going to be here next year. And I think that that's really, really important because, the Padres farm system is, as Ben Clemens put it, perpetually thin. And there's no help coming in left field next season from within the organization, which means that they would have to sign a free agent if they did not make this trade, or run out the likes of whatever next year's version of Jason Hayward is, and next year's version of Connor Joe or whatever. And so to make this trade, which really didn't cost you a lot, like, I know it's 6 guys, and I'm sure one of those guys is going to play in the major leagues. I don't know, who it's going to be, and I don't know what kind of impact they're going to have, but one of those guys will play in the major leagues. I think being able to shore up your left field for next season, have a outfield that each of the 3 guys has an all-star ceiling, like, that's pretty great. That's pretty great for 2026. And you can hope that by 2027, the Padres have figured out some sort of other solution. But you don't have to worry about the other 2 spots in the outfield for the rest of the 2020s, which is pretty cool to say. And
it's just like our lineup is so much different with just this little bit of added depth, where the bottom of the lineup is not just the pitchers are going to run them over. Ramon Laureano, he might do damage. Ryan O'Hearn, he might do damage. And then we'll talk about Fermin in the next episode, but Fermin, at least 250 batting average for his whole career. He'll, get a single once in a while out of the 9th slot, but whatever. It's just this depth problem that we had, and you could pitch around guys if you wanted to. Now you kind of can't, because there's damage coming at the bottom of the order at least once in a while.
Ramon Laureano is taking at bats in place of Bryce Johnson. That. You want to sum up the trade?
Incredible, just so you know. He's batting 330 or whatever, but
yeah, fine. Don't look at that BABIP, but hey, he's good, and he can bunt with the rest of them. And look, Bryce Johnson as the 5th outfielder on this team, awesome, great. I love that. But as your starting everyday left fielder, as some people were saying on like July 27th, we're like, maybe we don't need to trade for a left fielder. Look at BJ. I don't know about that one.
284 xwOBA, that would have been disaster in the playoffs.
Absolute disaster. So, I mean, I love this trade. It's just a classic, like, win now trade that I think it's so much more fun to be on this side of it than to be on the other side of it. So, good on AJ Preller, good use of his assets. Anything else before we move on to our next trade?
No, this is the one that, like, fills holes. It extends the lineup. This is the one. This was the home run trade. If it would have only been this trade, I also would have been perfectly acceptable of the deadline deals. But new other players are going to help too.
So we had the bold trade of Mason Miller and JP Sears for DeVries. We had the beautiful trade of Hearn and Laureano for the 6-pack. And coming up on our next episode, we have the bewildering trade of Fermin for Kolek and Bergert. So stick around for that in the next episode. But until then, for John Prokota, I'm Raphie Cantor, and we will see you next time.